We do have the finance minister now, and we will adjust accordingly. And maybe the finance minister adjusted accordingly to Omicron. Let's find out. Minister Freeland, great to have you on the program. And we hope your staff is healthy, and we hope everyone's healthy after the exposure. That's the number one thing. Did you rewrite the fiscal update recently to account? There's $4.5 billion that we don't know how it's going to be spent for Omicron, but were things rejigged to deal with this evolving situation?
Evan, do you mind if I just offer one precision for you? Because and nice to hear you. As I was walking into my seat here, I heard you say I was in isolation. And I just want to be a little more precise in case people see me on the street tonight and say, oh no, we heard she was in isolation. We watch Evan's show. We love it. So just to say, I am not in isolation. 2 people on my staff have tested positive in rapid tests, but I haven't been in direct contact with them. I haven't been in a room with them. But I just felt out of sort of an abundance of caution, it wasn't going to be appropriate for me to be in person in a cabinet meeting with the Prime Minister today, to be in person in a press conference with Canada's finest journalists today, or to be in the House of Commons. So that's why I'm doing my day virtually, just to be extra careful. So if people see me out in the wild, don't be scared. It's okay.
Okay, and you've tested negative. Okay, that's good.
I've tested negative twice on molecular tests. But I think now we should all, where we can, make choices to be careful. And do you want me to answer the question
but you've adjusted, so, yeah, did you adjust the fiscal update to, with that $4.5 billion for potential Omicron response, to recalibrate in the last little while?
Yes. We knew, since the fall, since we announced C2 at the end of October, we were very mindful that, hope as we all might, the fight against COVID wasn't totally finished yet. And that's why you'll remember, Evan, in C2, those additional measures we announced at the end of October, we included lockdown support. And I described it then as an insurance policy. Just in case we need extra lockdowns, we want to be sure we have the tools. But then as we were finalizing the fiscal and economic update, Omicron appeared, and we could see it really being extremely, extremely transmissible in a lot of countries. And I felt that to be transparent and to be prudent, we needed to provision a significant additional amount of money just in case we end up having to spend more to fight Omicron. So that's what we've done.
Okay, since you're flexible on that, and that's $4.5 billion, you just heard Aaron O'Toole and you just heard Jagmeet Singh, who was on this program, both say you should have been more flexible to deal with inflation, that this budget looks out of date, this update rather, it's not a budget, this fiscal update looks out of date because there's nothing to really deal with inflation specifically, there's nothing really to deal with the housing costs, and that you missed some of the most urgent issues facing Canadians. What is your response to that?
I totally disagree, Evan. Look, I think when it comes to inflation, it's really, really important that we have the correct diagnosis, because if you have the wrong diagnosis, you're going to have the wrong remedy. And the diagnosis for the elevated inflation that Canada is experiencing right now is this is a global phenomenon. It is driven by global factors, supply chain disruptions, high energy prices, just the reality that because of COVID restrictions, we all shifted to buying stuff instead of buying services, exacerbating supply chain disruptions. So this is happening around the world. It is not a made in Canada phenomenon. And I think it's important for Canadians also to appreciate, as I think they do, that inflation is a lot more elevated in a lot of other countries than it is in Canada. The U.S. recently posted 6.8%. The OECD average is 5.2%. So that is part one. Part two is
Sorry, can I just, let me just,
that we made. Do you want me to say one more thing or not?
Minister.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. You go ahead. I got a part one, but you always got a couple parts. Okay, you go part two, and then I'll come back.
Okay. Part two, Evan, is the announcement that I made yesterday with the Governor of the Bank of Canada, renewing the Bank of Canada mandate. And as you know very well, the Bank of Canada has the job of keeping inflation under control and being sure that higher inflation does not become entrenched. Yesterday, the governor and I announced a joint agreement renewing for 5 years the Bank of Canada's 2% inflation target. And, Evan, the Bank of Canada has done a great job over the past 30 years since it had an inflation target. It has kept inflation under control remarkably well in those 30 years. I have every confidence the Bank of Canada will continue to do that, and Canadians should share that confidence, and I think they do. I think Canadians trust the bank.
Okay, but you're sort of trying to have it both ways. If inflation is not, it's a global phenomenon, it's not Canada, why should the monetary policy have a better leverage than the fiscal policy to control it? I thought it was a global issue. But the other issue is the length of time that inflation is going to last. If inflation and supply chain disruptions are tied to COVID, and COVID is going on and on and on, and here we have now preparations for it to go even longer. That means inflation is going to last longer. Eventually, Minister, you're going to have to figure out a way. You may not have caused inflation, but you got to figure out how to help people. And it's not in this fiscal update. And there are other levers to do. By the way, some of them could be paying down the debt. Have you considered other levers to deal with the inflation crisis?
Well, I was with you, Evan, until you started speculating on other levers, and I'm not sure you got to a place that is going to help Canadians with the affordability challenge. But let me make a couple of specific points. We did in the budget include a specific measure on just offering some help to unsnarl Canada's supply chains, $50 million for Canadian ports to help be sure that goods are flowing through the country as effectively as possible. I think it's also really important to bear in mind that the supports that go to the most vulnerable Canadians, whether it is the GIS or the Canada Child Benefit or the GST tax credit, all of these are indexed to inflation. And that's for a reason. That's so that the most vulnerable among us are going to be protected. And, Evan, I really think, and this is also just my personal experience, from the time I finished university, the most important thing in the economic well-being of most people is to have a job. I think when all of us think, how are we going to pay our bills, that's the first thing we think about. And that's why, for me, when 3 million Canadians lost their job, that was the priority of the government, to get those jobs back. And that's why the fact that we've recovered 106% of the lost jobs really is so powerful and so important. And
but
then
that cuts both ways, though. Like if the jobs are back,
it's bad
and
that
the
we
economy's
recovered
roaring
the
back,
jobs.
why?
Surely not.
Okay, but then why keep the stimulus up? In other words, if the economy's back, there is a series of economic thinkers who say, now it's time to rein in the spending, because once the jobs are back, the spending has an inflationary pressure on it.
But Evan, I'm sure you noticed, and certainly Bay Street noticed, that at the end of October, we did precisely that. We pivoted, a very hard pivot, on our business and income supports. At the end of October, the CERB ended. At the end of October, the broad-based wage and income supports ended. And that was the right thing to do. I absolutely understand that the COVID spending was extraordinary spending, and it was appropriate only at an extraordinary time. And as soon as we saw the economy recovering, as soon as we saw that jobs recovery, we knew it was time to end those broad-based programs. We did that.
The Bloc Québécois spoke to me, and so did Jagmeet Singh. One of the things the provinces will want, and I know the Prime Minister is going to meet with the provinces again about border and other issues later tonight, just after you and I speak. But they want, they're knocking on your door to get healthcare spending, right? They want a 5, 6, 10% increase in healthcare spending. Not in this document. I know there's about $71 billion over the next 7 years. What do you say to the provinces? Will the government increase the Canada Health transfer to the provinces? And why isn't it, if so, and we're still in the pandemic, why not signal that now?
So as you've seen in the document, and we've been very clear about this, we were clear in the title, this is a fiscal and economic update. This is not a mini budget. This is not an economic plan for the next year. I think we did a lot and set a lot in motion in April, and we have another budget coming up. So this is letting Canadians know where we are, what the fiscal picture is, and importantly, reassuring Canadians that we are buying the things we need to buy to finish the fight against COVID. But I will say, when it comes to the provinces and healthcare, two things. First, we are continuing to do whatever it takes in the fight against COVID. This update does include, because we need to spend the money now, significant additional spending on vaccines and boosters, on therapeutics, $2 billion to buy therapeutic medicines. Now, I know that's a lot of money, but I don't think there will be any Canadian who regrets that spending. These are medicines that can help save lives and can help stop COVID. Significant spending, $1.7 billion on rapid tests, 180 million rapid tests. We're distributing these already now, free to provinces and territories. Right. We'd like to encourage them to distribute to Canadians. So we're spending a lot of money on healthcare. We are trusting the provinces and territories to use these tools to fight COVID. The second thing on the fiscal relationship between provinces and territories and the federal government, Evan, which I do highlight in this update, is we've been spending a lot of money, and not only has that supported the federal fiscal picture, right, it has been even more helpful for the fiscal balances of provinces and territories. 8 out of $10 spent have been spent by the federal government.
Okay.